There's really no typical day. I work for the former president of ABC News who doesn't sleep a lot. So a typical day really, there isn't one, but basically it's a mix of early morning calls with him about something that's going on. It might be negotiating a talent deal for ABC News, and he wants to check up on that. And by the way, this is like early, for me at least. I get up early, I just don't want to go anywhere, which is, I guess, the problem with some of it. So about 6:15, it might be a call about talent. So I was involved in some different deals with news. By the time you get into work, you've got typical meetings, things like that. But it's really a mix of dealing with individual, executive, and employee issues, team issues, organization issues. I'm a full-fledged member of the executive team. I have an MBA, so the day is a mix of organization and people work, but a lot of it is just pure business work too that I get involved in, whether it's strategy for the Disney ABC television group that I head up. It could be negotiating with lawyers in Los Angeles, again, over some executive deal. It could be planning a major look at an organization to how we can organize it better in a more contemporary fashion. One of the biggest things that we face, all industries face now, is this whole VUCA world, a world of a lot of volatility and uncertainty and complexity and ambiguity, right? And so a lot of my day is spent helping leaders deal with that VUCA world, right, and make an opportunity out of it so that volatility with the right leadership turns to a sense of vision, right? And that ambiguity, turns to a better sense of understanding and so on. So it's a mix of these team, individual, and business and people issues all day long, pretty much, yeah. And I think the biggest thing that I also face is just during the day is it's not only there's not enough time, there's almost not enough time to prioritize the right way. So that's a big piece of it. So you all know it. The real or imagined need to be plugged in all the time is both a great opportunity and the bane of some people's existence, right? Especially at times in business. And one of the biggest difference between the last 5 or 10 years and the years before that is, it isn't that you had more time, but you had the same amount of time, obviously, right? And it was less of a battle to focus on the bigger issues, the more important issues, the things that could really move the needle. And now you're almost pinged to death, right? Especially in a business setting. So you may want to work on something big and important, but you're pulled into things. So I like to say and sort of joke with my boss that I'm a strategic guy caught in a very tactical world, right? And so I'm constantly trying to lift up, to prioritize and have a bigger impact while I'm being pulled down, right? By this device. And if it's not, dozens of different executives that want something from me, then it's my family, relatives, hangers-on, who knows, right? Because that's the other thing. Anybody can ping you, right? And anybody can, get your email, and anybody can do a lot of weird things, right? So that's the biggest challenge, right?
Yeah.
Is just being pulled down too often. And then the addictive nature of responding, right? That you feel like you need to respond, and you get high if you can respond quickly, and someone says, "You're great," and it's like, not really. I just responded to a really simple, tactical request. I grew up in this major metropolitan area in Utah, Price, Utah. So for those of you that know anything about it, in the history books of Utah, it's known as the melting pot of Utah. And the primary reason is, in the 20th century, a host of immigrants came there from Eastern Europe, all over the world, really. And so my upbringing, I know people talk about diversity now and talk about all these things, but I just really lived it. I grew up that way. I'm going way back, but our high school quarterback was African American, right? And this is in the days when Utah was a lot more conservative than it might be today. And so it was really a melting pot and a mix, strong family influence, really a very diverse upbringing in every sense of the word, and around all kinds of different people. And I think there is something about growing up in the right small town that's very helpful too, in terms of relationships and those kind of things.
Yeah.
I think mainly my dad really influenced the most. He was all about excellence and perfection, which, carried to extreme causes anxiety in a young man, especially if you're the oldest son and son of immigrants. It seems to seems to really put a bit of a burden on it. But I think the most important thing I remember my dad always saying was to take care of your priorities and to make your family your priority, right? And I've watched so many executives get pulled away from things that they said were important to them, right? You don't listen to what people say. You look at what their calendar says, right? Their iPhone. Where are they spending their time? What's most important to them? So the ability to stay focused on family, whatever your definition of family is today, I think was really something that my dad pushed on us quite a bit and really helped me stay centered throughout my career. Basically, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like a lot of young people, I'm a sophomore, and I had vague notions if I was going to be a psychologist, and then I was going to be a school counselor, and all these other things. And basically, Gary Hansen, who's since retired here, talked to me about, at the time it was called Personnel and Industrial Relations. It was a business major. And I thought, well, this is interesting because I'm pretty good at working with people. I've held a lot of leadership positions. And making a long story short, I went home and talked to my dad and had whatever difficulty was going on there during my sophomore and junior year, and decided I wasn't going to go back to school. And my father usually didn't have a lot of profanity, but he got a little bit angry at me and told me that I really should get a business degree, and no one could ever take that away from me, and it would be very helpful. So as I leaned into, in this very, school, in the old building here is where I really discovered my passion, which is I can marry the people side and the business side and make quite a good living at it. And so my dad was pretty clever about pointing out not just the business degree, but my ability to deal with people, and why couldn't I find something to do with that, like a major in business. And then I bumped into Gary Hansen. It's strange how these things happen, fate, or if you believe in lots of different things, divine intervention or Carl Jung or whatever these things are, synchronicity. But I just happened to bump into Gary Hansen, never taken a class from him. Somebody said to go see him, and kind of the world opened up from there, really. It was a little bit of divine help, One thing that I wanted to say about how you enter the professional world is, and I say this every time I get a chance to talk about it because it's still true, is that this undergraduate education I got at Utah State put me on equal or better footing than anyone in the U.S. I mean, I had to compete for positions with people literally that had gone to Harvard, that had gone to Cornell, that had gone to Berkeley, in terms of the people side, particularly the human resources side and the MBA side of things. And the foundation that I got at this university, at this school at the time, was really unbelievable. And it is a plug for the university today because I think it's even better. And one of the best things that's happened to the business school is Doug coming here, and I forget the year, if it was 07 or 08 or 09, probably 09, I think, probably, or 08. Doug, when was it?
06.
Oh my goodness, so I am getting old apparently. So 06, and that laid a foundation for me to join at the time U.S. Steel, and they interviewed well over 200 people across the country from all these prestigious schools, and I got an executive trainee job growing up in Price, Utah, going to Utah State. And, that was my first sense of I can compete with anyone. I thought I could athletically and all that other stuff naively, right? Because college football and all that's quite a bit different. But that set me up for U.S. Steel. And one of the first strategic decisions I made to change careers was really because of being typecast, right, as a steel labor relations person. So not to make the story too long, but I really thought I needed consumer products experience. I really think I wanted to get out of being typecast as a steel labor guy and employee relations guy. And so I joined PepsiCo really as my first kind of real thoughtful strategic move to reposition my career for the long run. Yeah. PepsiCo was to get repositioned almost as a brand. A lot of people talk about brand. You're a brand, I'm a brand, everybody's a brand. I was thinking of the long term and I said I loved U.S. Steel. I had a great career path. I was the youngest person, I know it sounds bragging, but it's actually true, ever promoted into the labor relations group, so why would I leave, right? I left because, again, I got some great training here and some great mentors about the long term, not just maximizing for the short term, your career, what you wanted to do. And I had a hole in my portfolio called, consumer products, more direct consumer connections, that type of thing. So I joined PepsiCo for the brand experience, for the consumer experience. I went to Allied Signal Honeywell because I wanted international experience. So I was the head of international HR for 5 years. I traveled literally the world and helped privatize companies in Romania, and just a lot of on-the-ground work that was, unbelievable experience, right? Probably the best experience of my career almost. And but I did Allied Signal Honeywell because I needed international experience. I felt I wanted that. And I was tapped out at PepsiCo in terms of getting that in the near term, right? And it's always an opportunity cost equation from basic economics, right? Do you want to stay 2 or 3 years to think you can be an HR head in PepsiCo, or do you want to take the opportunity that's in front of you now, right? So I did the calculus and joined them for international experience, right? I did the internet world with Walker Digital for a while because I wanted entrepreneurial work. I'd never done that. I'd never started up companies, which for those of you who are thinking about doing it, it's a tremendous amount of work. You've always got your hat in hand. You're always selling. You're selling all the time. You're selling employees to come to work for you. You're selling investors. You're selling bankers. You're selling maybe some people you don't even like a lot. So you're constantly selling to get companies off the ground. And Walker Digital, if you don't know this, had incubated a Priceline, which still exists today, right? So entrepreneurial bug, the summer of whatever it was, where everybody was doing internet companies in 2001 and 2000. And that crashed and burned for 2 reasons. The bottom fell out of NASDAQ, and then also, unfortunately, the 9/11 and all the massive slowdown that happened across the company. So I live in Los Angeles, Southern California, which I'll tell you a story in a minute about LA and New York. And it's the entertainment capital of the world. All the major entertainment companies are headquartered there, and I'm driving down the 5 freeway. For those of you that know the 5 freeway, it says 5 freeway south, but many times it doesn't go south, so I don't know why it's called 5 south, but that's another funny thing about Southern California in entertainment, where up is down, down is up, Alice in Wonderland, So I was driving down the road, and an executive recruiter called me, Paul McCartney, but not the Paul McCartney, but they had a really interesting job open at Disney. And at the time, Disney isn't quite the company that it was today, and I declined it, and they came back again. And long story short, I really also wanted to get entertainment experience. And I felt that would really round out the portfolio, and that's really panned out quite nicely. Yeah. So it depends on the position, right, as you're all trained to know. But in general, when someone gets to me, if I could say it this way, at the last phase or whatever you want to call it, then it's really about fit for culture, right? And it's a tricky thing about fit for culture, because you don't want to hire too many that fit the culture today, right? Because that can be a problem if you're trying to change or modify the culture. So what I really look at is this person's proven ability to lead a team, to influence people, because that's one of the most important currencies in the world today, is not how smart you are. It's the things I'm sure you've already learned here around emotional intelligence and native intelligence, right? And you have to have a great mix of it. So I look for their ability to influence people, the ability to read cues of me in the meeting, like do they have good emotional intelligence? Are they reading me? And it's interesting, you can interview a lot of senior people that are, of course, on their best behavior during an interview, and they're pretty clever, of course, at that stage of the game if they're interviewing with me. But I'm still a bit amazed at people that don't read cues, right? So if I'm trying to look like I would like to ask a question, a savvy executive wanting to get hired that could fit the culture, the future culture, should be able to read and pause and give me some space to ask a question, but sometimes people don't. So I can attribute a lot of things to that. They're a poor listener, they have low emotional intelligence, they had a bad day, I'm so charming or whatever that they just want me to keep going on, or they want to go on, I don't know. But I really do, if people can't read the tells, meaning signaling of people, how can they possibly be a great leader? How, right? So again, this ability to influence. So I look for culture fit, strategic fit, if you will, thinking, and really the people side, the influence ability. Because today, by the way, the interesting thing about influencing people today, when I came through Utah State, it was kind of easy in terms of the influence, because it was all in the analog world, the physical world. I had to influence a room full of people. If I did that well, Yay, great day. Now you have to influence people in the virtual world, right? The physical world, and then both, the augmented world, right? So that idea of influence today is really, really tricky, and your ability to influence people is going to be one of the most important currencies you'll ever need or possess if you want to work in any organization. And by the way, it does help at home too. It does help at home as well.
That's great.
Well, I probably have subconsciously a repertoire or portfolio of certain questions, but it's really all about being open to what's happening in the moment, right? But this is true not only of interviewing, but life and business, is if you're paying attention enough to what's going on, you're going to see and feel and have an advantage that other people won't. And so I'm constantly observing, really observing what's happening in front of me so I can tailor the right questions for what I'm picking up on. And you may have read this online or somewhere, but it's one of the reasons Harvard, Stanford, I could go through the litany of companies, are now taking meditation practices and bringing it into MBA programs. I don't know if all the monks in China and Taiwan and everyone are happy about that, but it's really to help build awareness, right, of what's happening in front of you. And that ability to read and have awareness is so important in today's business. And there's nothing in life today that's going to help you build awareness. Everything is built to distract you. So if you can maintain focus, that's a big advantage. And I try to ascertain that in the interviews as well.
Yeah.
Well, one, this is going to sound simple, but I think that's the problem. Things that are simple and common sense aren't so common, right? So one of the things I learned is as a leader, you have to meet people initially where they are. And what that means simplistically is you can have all the strategic thinking in the world. You could have read the late Dr. Covey's books. You could, read all kinds of things. But if you forget to meet people where they are, you have a big problem, right? So you have to start with where are people and then bring them to where you would like them to be, right? And one of the mistakes I've made, and I've made many, is getting ahead of where people are to begin with, right? So that I'm out ahead of people and they're still here. Not here in a negative way, but here I haven't done my work to connect with them. I haven't built the right motivating future vision for them. And then what typically happens is I've got to go back and do rework because I got ahead of my people, right? Or got ahead of myself. So that's certainly one mistake. I probably spend the whole day, but I'll give you a couple more. One is having high expectations, which is always great, right? If you're a leader, we all want to have high expectations for ourselves and for our teams. But sometimes somebody like me can be a little too much for people, right? Too much. My expectations, it goes back to childhood, it goes back to a whole bunch of other things, can be too much, right? So again, there's nothing wrong with having extraordinarily high expectations, but you've got to bring your people along with you. And sometimes you've got to prioritize for people because you can get ahead of them. And then lastly, I've made hiring mistakes. Definitely have made hiring mistakes, even supposedly as good as I am, because looking back, I projected skills and strengths that weren't there. I thought the interview was well, and this took a little time, like not a day or a week, like years looking back saying, there are times when I wanted more and believed more and felt this person had more potential than they actually did. So it's called interview bias. If we had the industrial psych people here again, they could talk to you all about bias, right? Unconscious bias and bias. So I've made mistakes because of unconscious bias, right? I don't think it was conscious, but it didn't matter, right? Two things stand out on how I made those moves, and I appreciate that you think I was confident. It was probably other things too, but I thought about my career strategically. So all the concepts you learn in business school apply to your career. Don't think that strategic planning only applies to a business setting, literally, that you're on an executive team trying to plan the future. It's your future. So I put good use of strategic skills and planning, right? And what was in the portfolio. And good strategic planning is a vision about the future, right? And it can't be someone else's vision because then there's no competitive advantage. If our strategy in Disney ABC Television Group is the same as Fox or name your tune, then there's no strategy. It's just mimicking, right? But the second thing I did, which sounds simple again, is you need to make sure you're driving versus being driven. Because there's going to be so many things that are going to drive you somewhere, your mom, your dad, your wife, your girlfriend, your long ago passed away grandfather, right? I mean, these things come up. And if you don't have quiet time to think about what you want, and are you driving, or is your boss, your mentor from the Huntsman School? So I had to spend a lot of time learning to drive, literally, versus being driven, right? Because so many people are going to want to hire you. And that's great. That's a great problem to have. But be careful, right? They're driving, not you. What do you want? What do you need? And when you get a little more experience, all kinds of executive search firms, online and otherwise, are going to want you, which is flattering and feeds your ego. So you're going to chase off on a bunch of things, thinking this is so great. But you're not driving. You're being driven. So that's the second thing I did to make those moves, is to really make sure that I was driving versus being driven. You know. In a nutshell, the HR strategy is driven off the business strategy, right? And our business strategy, and that's the only way I can think about it, and that's the way I've been trained in it. So the business strategy is integrated as the human resource strategy is integrated as part of the business strategy. So part of our business strategy, just a quick statement, is to get our storytelling to audiences around the world where and when they want it, right? Great storytellers. And so part of this is, where do you find great storytellers? So we look at the war for talent. We look at talent strategically in the market. We project out supply and demand. Are we going to make the talent, buy the talent? So the things you might have in a manufacturing sector, we've put into our human resource plan. What's the supply and demand, right? Are we going to make the talent, buy the talent, as I said? So it's all driven off the business strategy, and right now there's an explosion of original TV content around the world, and you're the beneficiaries of it, right? Amazon, Hulu, all over. Everyone's getting into making TV shows that didn't used to make them. Or I would just say it this way, not TV shows. They're making storytelling, right? Content that you want to watch. It could be short form on YouTube, whatever. So because of this explosion in the supply of content, it has a rippling effect, if you remember econ, into the labor market, right? So we're very much, my team is mostly MBAs and business people and HR people combined, and we just drive it off of the business strategy. But it is all about talent. It begins and ends with talent, the right organization structure, and you also have to have the right culture and work environment. That's a big differentiator today, more so than in the past. I think two things. One is, where can you learn the most? And learn the most, literally. And then really getting a sense of the culture. So let me give you some quick examples. And don't take this literally, it's just sort of a framework to think about, right? So if you have the choice to work for a Fortune 50 company that has a great executive training program or mentoring program, and also seems to have a great reputation for hiring, undergraduates in business, human resources, whatever. And then you've got a chance to work for a very small firm in Utah. You should think about where you're going to learn the most. Again, if you're looking at this in the long run, right? So I'm not saying pass up the small firm just ad hoc, but you want to go broad in the beginning, I think, not narrow. You can always go narrow. It's really hard to stay narrow and then 10 years later say, I would love, just an example, I would love to be the head of strategic planning for the Walt Disney Company. You're not going to be the head of strategic planning after 10 years in a small firm with an MBA, right? You could do a lot of other great work. So I think go broad and probably go as diverse as possible initially, because you can always rotate out. It's a lot harder to go back in. So where can you learn the most? Where's the culture? And the clue on the culture thing is, because companies are even more clever today, sorry to knock social media for a minute, on projecting this image of what it's like to work there, and you're going to be King and Steve Jobs. If not Steve Jobs, you'll be Sheryl Sandberg. You'll be somebody really quick if you just go for that interview. Well, one of the things you have to do is not listen to the leaders in those companies about culture. You have to talk to people and peers. Talk to them however you can, online, with a phone. What's it like to work there? Tell me when there's conflict. How is the hierarchy there, right? So really check out the culture is the second real big tip. Every day I actually do a little gratitude exercise, and I quickly, it's not always the same people, but I do give thanks for people who influence my life. It's kind of, it's kind of emotional a little bit, but so yes is the answer. So Bob Orhosky at U.S. Steel, who's not with us, he saw something in me that I didn't. So again, really moved up the ranks there. Doug Anderson helped me at a really difficult moment in 2009 when, now it can be told I was really wondering, should I do this corporate thing anymore? And, I was mixing up a whole bunch of other issues. And Doug was extraordinarily helpful on making sure that I was driving versus being driven by a whole bunch of symptoms. I've had great female mentors. Agnes Ebbs at PepsiCo took a big interest in me. The CFO of the entire PepsiCo company took me under her wing when I first went to corporate because it was a pretty tough place to work, and sort of looked out for me and mentored me. So most of my mentors, like all things, it's a mix of you being open and chemistry, right? And so I'm definitely here today, and if I've been successful, it's because a whole bunch of people, helped me. And so most of the rest of my life, what I'd love to do is just, simply give back to people that have, helped me. So I don't know if it takes a village, but it certainly takes a lot of mentors, I think, to be successful too. Yeah. Basically, do people have empathy? Do they display empathy? Are they great at listening? Can they read tells? I hope there aren't too many poker players in here, but if there are, poker players are extremely adept at reading tells. Customer service people, front desk people at hotels are trained, particularly at the higher end hotels, to read the tells of the customer, right? So some big tenets of emotional intelligence are empathy, deep listening, the ability in the moment to influence people. So that's a lot of what I look for, right? And as I said earlier, obviously if I'm interviewing somebody and not picking up on my cues, that's a problem, right? So we're actually doing it now in the Walt Disney Company and Disney ABC Television Group. So let me give you just a couple examples. So first of all, as I said, you've got to have an HR plan that is really anchored in the business plan, right? That's the place you have to start. And in Disney, we believe our competitive advantage is, and it's sort of seamless between the brands of Disney and what it's like to work there, right? So I always consider myself a huge brand steward for the company as well, and anything I'm doing, I wake up every day thinking about the brand. And the intersection between the human capital and the business strategy shows up when we can gain an advantage in the labor market, say for software engineers, which is hyper competitive. And why would they come to an entertainment company now, versus Silicon Valley, right? So we're able to gain the competitive advantage by talking about the broader portfolio of our brands and our experiences, the way that we use technology to develop and get our product out around the world in the hands of consumers. So, that's one example of how you gain an advantage. And part of it's marketing, but it has to be real, right? So part of it is having the best leaders in place, the best work environment for software engineers, and then getting that message out to people virally in any way you can, right? To engineers. And engineers and where you recruit them is very different than you might recruit business folks and others, right? So that's one way we've been able to gain a bigger toehold in the labor market against our competitors. Yeah. There's a couple. So what I do is go big and then go small. In other words, I start out with a macro framework. There's so many problems that I deal with, and some are dilemmas that you just have to live with for a while. But if it's a real problem, then I try to get deeply underneath the presenting symptoms, right, like a physician would, and say, let's not look at those yet. Let's think more broadly about what might be causing this, right? And when I'm in that mode, it's an expansive mode, so I almost always bring in a couple team members, not just in HR, and say, help me think about not this problem, help me think about a framework for this problem, bouncing ideas around and putting, a big frame, a box around it. And then I spend a little bit of time alone, even if it's just 2 minutes, the way the world works, to just get quiet and then think about it and go down to a micro basis, right? And then come back up again and then bounce solutions off of team members. That's what's always really worked for me. You can do it online too, but I think initially, particularly the framework part of it, is really about some engagement with humans, somehow face-to-face, even if it's on a video conference. So a lot of people drill down. I actually push up and then go down. It's hard, and I did this quote once for a talk here that from David O. McKay. For those that are Mormon or LDS know that he was the president of the church for quite some time. And it just stuck with me. And it stuck with my dad, who's not Mormon. He just would always say, that your family is going to be your competitive advantage. And I thought, what is he talking about? I mean, he's not a business person, right? And my junior year up here, but the quote from David O. McKay was something close to no success in life can make up for failure in the home. Right? And it's not been a time, because sometimes the time's out of balance of focus on family, but it's the priority, right? I rarely missed my son or daughter's event at school. I was not going to be one of those dads that had a regret, later in life about that. You block it on your calendar and you go, and life goes on within you or without you, right? And there's nothing criminal 20 years ago or 20 minutes ago saying, I'm leaving at 4 to go to my daughter's recital. But no one's going to help you make it a priority. Nobody's going to come down from the sky, from the business school and say, thou shalt focus on family. You have to make it happen. You have to make your calendar literally align with what your mouth is saying. Family's important, great. Then what are you doing about it? Or whatever your priority is. It doesn't have to be family. For me, it gave me the comfort always, to do much better in the world and the business world, without question, and there's a toll to play, if you, as I tell people, I want everyone to be really ambitious. That's great. And you should be really ambitious at this stage of the game about your career. And maybe you should even be singularly focused. But my advice is take some of that ambition and spread it to other areas of your life. But only do that if you want a successful life. If you want a successful career, then don't do it. And you won't have a successful life, probably, but that's okay. Some people make those choices. I didn't, That's something I'm not going to regret. So you can do both. It's just you decide what your priorities are. I have 2 pieces of advice. First of all, this may sound counterintuitive. I wouldn't get too neurotic about planning the future specifically, right? That I need to be X by some period of time, I need to be married by X period of time. You need to prepare yourself for what can come across in a serendipitous way too. So prepare yourself, and luck helps too, right? But where luck and prep come together seems to be these great things. So I'd plan more strategically, but I wouldn't overplan tactically, if that makes any sense. Trying to plan your life by, I'm going to be something by this age, I don't particularly think that's a great idea, but I think keeping your vision broader about what you want to contribute to society and life and your community and your family, and keeping that in mind is important. And of course you need yearly goals, of course you do, right? But you got to lift up, because if you stay too focused on those goals, it may take you off track, right? You need to have bifocal vision, short and long-term both. I don't know that I've always had like a specific list, but what I've simply done is get quiet time to say, what do I want to do? How do I want to think about this decision? And try to filter out the voices of others for a while, even very helpful voices. So my criteria really is getting quiet time to say, what do I want? What do I need? How does this fit my version of my strategic career plan? And you need quiet time to do that, because everybody's going to have a lot of great advice. And so I think you've got to bring that advice in, and you've got to have some quiet time and a framework then to make the call yourself. And it's been more about quiet time, contemplative time after gathering input, and talking to my wife, Tammy, and then making the decision, right? And again, whatever your spiritual beliefs are, if you don't have any, I hope you do, then there's a way of getting some quiet time to guide you as well that I found has always been very helpful, right? So I don't have this tick list, but you just sometimes got to make sure that the voices of others you've listened to, but they're not unduly weighting your decision, right? And you can read so many stories of business school executives that written about that 20 years later they decided to go in a different career path, or they never wanted to be a lawyer, or they never wanted to be a doctor, and they finally stopped, and it's because they were being driven by, well-intentioned parents and friends and others, right? So the best advice I can say is, to guard against it, there's two things. Have your own vision of your future. That's always an important strategy. And then get quiet time. And that should help guide you better than other kinds of checklists. Let's assume you've done enough research and you really want to be in entertainment. Then hopefully you know what specific area of entertainment, because it's a very broad, right, area. And by the way, this whole notion that there aren't business people, that there's just a bunch of creatives running around making things is really crazy. Disney is absolutely, unbelievably strategically and financially driven. So great business people can have really super great careers in entertainment. And again, you've got to be really clear about what you want to do and the value proposition you put forward, right? If I had like $10 for every email, text I get that I love Disney, I've thought of Disney since I was a child, I love whatever, Hannah Montana, and I really want to work for Disney, but that's not very helpful to me. Like, okay, what do I do with that? Like, great, they really want to work for Disney. So do a million people. I can't do anything with that. So you have to have a value proposition. You have to write and articulate why you possess something uniquely related to the role you want, or a vertical that you want. If you want to be in business affairs, if you want to be a strategic planner, you've got to come forward with your story, right? So what's your 1 minute elevator pitch? Because entertainment is all about pitches. You've got a minute, and we might buy your script, we might not, right? And it's the same way for all of you. And you're in a generation that's more well-trained than I am at this, which is, what's the minute? Give me a minute of why you're great. Give me a minute, what's your story? And some people can't do it, right? Can't get their story out. So you got to really hone and practice your story, and you've got to be really prepared, because nobody has the time to listen to why you want to work for Disney because you adored Hannah Montana. Well, I guess what really happened is part of my upbringing. Really, I was around diverse people, and I held a lot of class offices, and I was always influencing people literally very diverse. It was quite normal to me. I didn't have to be trained in it. So I think that upbringing and just, I think, really foundational skills in economics and finance and so on, came across in these interviews. And there was bias for sure of, oh, he's from Utah and he went to this Utah State. But where it matters is on the playing field, right? And when I got a chance to play on the field, right, then the degrees, all that, none of it mattered anymore, right? Because it was about performance. That's the great thing about athletes too, and other occupations. It matters where you go to school, but it matters what you do on the field. Once I got in front of people at Pepsi and could start to be on the practice field at least, then it just went away. And it was my ability to get across in the interview that I was a business person, not just a human resource person, and that I was able to hold my own intellectually and through diverse, topics and a whole bunch of other areas, right? Which is, I know no one's asked the question, but I think the more you read and think about non-business topics too, the more it actually helps you, believe it or not. It sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes you need to move away from certain subjects that you have an expertise in and take something in the arts or read fiction or whatever it is, because a lot of my best ideas have never come from a business seminar per se, right? I'm wandering around and I was in a museum or I'm reading some fiction, and then 3 hours later I have some kind of a thought about it, right? I think whatever the arts, anything that will take you away for a little while, to think about different things and topics and different people. The more different people you can be around, the better too, the better. And in all phases, people that think different, people that act different, you learn a lot from people that are different from you. I've had to learn the hard way, and I've only gotten really good at it the last 15 years, really good at it. And just some small tips here for what this is worth is, you need to start out thinking of minimums, right? And this applies to any area of life. Like if someone thinks they want to lose 40 pounds, oh my gosh, 40 pounds. But what if you just lost 2 pounds in a month, right? So what I'm saying is it's too hard to go from maybe not having much reflection time or quiet time to say, I'm going to block 30 minutes every day, but you won't. So start out with what I call minimums. Can I get 10 minutes 3 times a week to sit without a book, without a TV, without a screen in front of me and think or reflect, right? So it's part of it's minimums, and part of it is being around different people, because one of the things for me is I started noticing, again, what great observational skills I must have had. When I wasn't around people working in large corporations and business, they seemed to have more time to reflect than I did. Why? Because they didn't have the demanding job that I had. Why? Because they made other choices, right? But I was learning some things about their life from them, right? So I'm saying this minimums coupled with developing some kind of routine a day that even if it's 5 minutes for reflection, or some people at the end of the day will do a gratitude or reflection exercise, 5 minutes. So think of minimums, think about, and there's a lot of classes that tell you this, your eulogy at your funeral, right? And work back from it. What do you want to be remembered for? That you just made it in business, or what else did you want to be remembered for? And just try to take small steps backwards to say, how do I ensure at the end of my life I did most of what I wanted to do and I kept myself on my priorities, right? The other thing that's really helped me is I've had great partners, right? I have a great wife who doesn't let me get away with too much, but it's also some friends that have helped reinforce this, right? That have said, hey, are you meeting your minimums? That's our code word for have you exercised 3 times this week, Steve, for half an hour? So we all need buddies, literally, to help us with this idea of reflection, contemplation, right? And you don't have to overdo it. People say to me, how could you possibly have a meditative practice? And I said, how could I possibly not, right? With all the stress and everything I'm under. So I can send this along, but I don't want to say it's advice, but it's just some helpful things around resilience that I've brought into Disney. How do you enhance and develop your ability to be resilient in this world? And it's all about minimums, small things you can do to improve your physical and mental health and your cognitive capability, right? So the research is there, but we ignore it because we're too busy. And Steve Covey had one of the best lines ever. I remember when I met him and talked to him back in 1990, his book about, sawing, on the tree branch or whatever. And the saw was getting dull. I don't know if you read the book, but he gives the example of a person literally sawing. And Mr. Covey in the book says, Dr. Covey said, well, why don't you pause to sharpen the saw? The person said, I'm just too busy sawing, which is what we all do. We're too busy sawing, but it's not getting any quicker to saw with a dull blade, right? And obviously you don't want to become dull, right?